Good evening, dear listeners. As the day gently fades into the quiet embrace of night, we invite you to settle into a comfortable position, allowing the weight of the world to lift from your shoulders. This is a moment dedicated to relaxation and peace, where the sounds of history will lull you into a serene state, guiding you toward the restful sleep you seek. In this soothing journey, we will explore a subject that, while seemingly dry and unassuming, holds a unique beauty within its intricate details: the Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines. You might wonder how such a topic could possibly induce relaxation, but allow me to assure you that within these historical intricacies lie stories of organization, diligence, and the everyday lives of people who navigated their world through a complex system of governance and finance. As we drift into this exploration together, we will begin by depicting the landscape of the Byzantine Empire, a realm bustling with life, culture, and the rhythmic cadence of commerce. We will then gently transition into the mechanisms of tax collection that were employed to sustain this grand empire. Picture, if you will, the meticulous clerks and officials, their quills scratching softly against parchment, recording the details of every transaction in a world where precision was paramount. Next, we will delve into the verification procedures that ensured fairness and accuracy in tax collection. Imagine the careful checks and balances in place, the whispers of discussions among officials, the nods of agreement, and the sense of responsibility that accompanied each decision made. These procedures, while perhaps tedious, reflect a deep commitment to the integrity of the empire's financial systems. As we wander further along this winding path of history, we will touch upon the importance of payment receipt documentation. Visualize the delicate pieces of paper, inscribed with seals and signatures, serving as a promise of accountability. Each receipt tells a story of trust, a tangible reminder of the transactions that fueled the empire's growth and stability. Throughout this historical narrative, we will maintain a gentle pace, allowing the rhythm of our words to wash over you like a soft breeze on a warm summer evening. We will take our time to savor each detail, ensuring that you feel enveloped in a cocoon of tranquility as we traverse the annals of Byzantine taxation. As we approach the end of our introduction, let us take a deep breath together. Inhale slowly, filling your lungs with calm, and exhale gently, releasing any tension or stress you may be holding on to. With each breath, feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation, ready to embrace the soothing tales of a time long past. Now, dear listeners, as we prepare to embark on this gentle exploration of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines, let your mind float freely, allowing the weight of your eyelids to grow heavier. Let the soft cadence of our story carry you away, as we begin our journey into the quietly fascinating world of Byzantine history. Close your eyes and let the soothing rhythm of the past guide you into a peaceful slumber. We shall begin shortly, and may you find comfort in the tales that await. The origins of the Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures can be traced back to the establishment of the Byzantine Empire in the year 330 CE, when Emperor Constantine I, also known as Constantine the Great, inaugurated the city of Constantinople on the site of Byzantium. This city, strategically located on the Bosporus Strait, served not only as the capital of the Byzantine Empire but also as a central hub for trade and administrative activities. The intricate system of tax collection and the subsequent verification procedures would evolve over the centuries, reflecting the complexities of governance in a sprawling empire. The tax collection system in the early Byzantine Empire was heavily influenced by its Roman predecessors. From the inception of tax policies, the Byzantine administration required a structured approach to documentation and verification to ensure compliance and accuracy in tax revenue. The use of written records became paramount, necessitating a systematic method for the documentation of tax assessments, collection, and receipts. In the early years of the empire, the tax collection process was overseen by local officials known as curiales, or decuriones, who were responsible for collecting taxes from their respective jurisdictions. These officials operated within a framework established by the imperial edicts, which outlined the various forms of taxation, including land taxes, poll taxes, and duties on goods. The curiales were expected to submit regular reports to the central administration, detailing the amounts collected and any discrepancies observed. By the reign of Emperor Justinian I, from 527 to 565 CE, the Byzantine tax system underwent significant reform. Justinian's attempts to consolidate imperial authority necessitated a more rigorous approach to tax collection and documentation. In 535 CE, he issued the Codex Justinianus, which included provisions for the standardization of tax collection procedures across the empire. This codification aimed to eliminate regional discrepancies and ensure uniformity in tax obligations. As part of these reforms, a more formalized verification procedure was instituted. Tax collectors, known as strategoi, were appointed to oversee the collection of taxes at a regional level. They were tasked with ensuring that the assessments were accurate and that the collected amounts aligned with the imperial directives. The strategoi maintained detailed records, which included lists of taxable properties, the names of taxpayers, and the amounts owed. These records were crucial for verifying compliance and preventing fraud. In addition to the strategoi, a secondary layer of verification was created through the establishment of a bureaucratic body known as the logothetes, or accountants. These officials were responsible for maintaining the fiscal records of the empire and ensuring that all tax revenues were accurately accounted for. The logothetes conducted audits of the strategoi's records, comparing them against the original assessments and the amounts reported as collected. This meticulous process was designed to prevent discrepancies and ensure that the imperial coffers were adequately filled. The architectural development of the Byzantine Empire during this period also played a vital role in the evolution of tax collection practices. The construction of monumental buildings, such as the Hagia Sophia, completed in 537 CE, symbolized the wealth and power of the Byzantine state. The funding for such grand projects often relied heavily on tax revenues, thereby increasing the importance of efficient tax collection and verification procedures. The daily routines of tax collectors and their administrative teams were characterized by rigorous adherence to established protocols. Tax collection typically began in the early morning, with collectors preparing for their rounds by consulting ledgers and reviewing previous records. The collectors, accompanied by scribes, would visit local businesses and properties to assess tax obligations. At each site, they would verify ownership and the corresponding tax rates. Upon completion of their assessments, the collectors would document the amounts owed and provide taxpayers with a receipt, which served as proof of their tax obligations. Throughout this process, meticulous attention to detail was paramount. Receipts were standardized forms that included essential information such as the taxpayer's name, the property assessed, the amount due, and the date of issuance. These receipts were often inscribed on parchment or papyrus, utilizing ink made from carbon and other natural materials. The physical documentation served not only as a record of payment but also as a means of verifying tax compliance in subsequent years. The Byzantine Empire continued to refine its tax collection processes throughout the medieval period. By the 9th century, during the reign of Emperor Basil I, administrative practices had become increasingly sophisticated. Basil's reign, beginning in 867 CE, saw the introduction of the pronoia system, which allowed military leaders to collect taxes from landholders in exchange for protection. This arrangement further complicated the verification procedures, as the pronoia holders were now responsible for both tax collection and military service. In this context, the verification of tax payments became an even more critical aspect of governance. The pronoia holders were required to submit regular accounts to the central administration, detailing the amounts collected and the status of tax compliance within their jurisdictions. These accounts were scrutinized by imperial officials, who ensured that the pronoia holders were fulfilling their obligations. Failure to meet these requirements could result in punitive measures, including the loss of privileges or even imprisonment. As the Byzantine Empire entered the 11th century, the administrative structure continued to evolve. The introduction of the carcellarius, a bureaucratic role that specialized in record-keeping, further streamlined the verification process. The carcellarii were responsible for maintaining detailed archives of tax receipts and payment records, ensuring that discrepancies could be easily identified and resolved. The architectural landscape of the Byzantine Empire also reflected these administrative developments. The construction of large administrative buildings, such as the Great Palace of Constantinople, provided a centralized location for tax collection and documentation activities. These structures typically featured open courtyards and numerous rooms dedicated to record-keeping and administrative functions. The layout of these buildings facilitated communication among officials and provided a secure environment for the storage of sensitive financial documents. By the 12th century, during the reign of Emperor Manuel I Comnenos, the tax collection verification procedures had become increasingly complex. The introduction of new tax categories, such as the kapnikan, a tax levied on the use of hearths, necessitated further refinements in documentation practices. Tax collectors were required to provide detailed accounts of the new tax assessments, along with the corresponding receipts, in order to maintain transparency and accountability. Daily routines for tax officials at this time involved extensive collaboration with local leaders and community members. Tax collectors often held public meetings to explain new tax policies and procedures, fostering an environment of understanding and cooperation. These meetings also served as a forum for addressing taxpayer concerns and disputes, which were documented and referred to the appropriate administrative bodies for resolution. As the Byzantine Empire faced various external threats and internal strife during the late medieval period, the importance of effective tax collection and verification persisted. The rise of the Ottoman Empire in the 14th century introduced new challenges, necessitating the continued evolution of the Byzantine tax system. The remaining Byzantine territories adapted their verification procedures to accommodate the changing political landscape, though the intricacies of tax collection documentation remained largely intact. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and, consequently, the termination of its intricate tax collection verification procedures. However, the legacy of these practices continued to influence subsequent administrative systems in the region. The Ottoman Empire, which succeeded the Byzantine state, inherited many bureaucratic traditions, including those related to tax collection and verification. In conclusion, the history of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines provides a detailed account of the evolution of bureaucratic practices over the centuries. From the early administrative structures established by Constantine the Great to the refined processes of the Komnenian period, the Byzantine approach to tax collection exemplified a commitment to accuracy, accountability, and efficiency. The architectural developments, daily routines, and administrative procedures that characterized this history underscore the significant role that taxation played in the governance of one of history's most enduring empires. The meticulous nature of these practices, though perhaps tedious in its detail, reveals the challenges and complexities faced by Byzantine officials in their efforts to maintain financial stability and imperial authority. The Byzantine Empire, renowned for its complex bureaucratic structures, implemented a comprehensive system for tax collection verification that extended to various aspects of construction, maintenance, financial documentation, personnel management, and technical specifications. Each of these elements played an integral role in ensuring the efficient management of tax revenues, which were vital for sustaining the imperial treasury and, by extension, the stability of the empire. Construction methods and materials. The construction of tax collection offices and related buildings was heavily regulated. The preferred materials included locally sourced limestone, which was noted for its durability, and brick, which was often used in conjunction with mortar made from lime and volcanic ash. The use of these materials dates back to at least the 5th century, with specific measurements for brick dimensions standardized to 40 cm in length, 20 cm in width, and 10 cm in height. In the year 574, Emperor Justin II issued a series of edicts that mandated the construction of regional tax offices at specified intervals of no more than 20 Roman miles apart. These offices were to be constructed using a minimum of 2 stories, with a minimum height of 6 meters from the ground to the eaves. Roofs were typically sloped and covered with terracotta tiles, measuring 30 centimeters by 15 centimeters, to facilitate water drainage. The foundations were required to be at least 1 meter deep to prevent water damage, a common issue given the climatic conditions of certain regions. Maintenance procedures. Maintenance procedures for these structures were equally systematic. Regular inspections were mandated every 5 years, with a detailed report required on the condition of the buildings. This report needed to include specific measurements of any structural deficiencies, such as cracks exceeding 2 cm in width or signs of water infiltration. Repairs were to be documented meticulously, noting both the date of repair and the cost incurred. In 619, an edict was issued that required the establishment of a dedicated team of maintenance workers, known as the edificators, who were responsible for the upkeep of tax collection offices. Each team was to consist of at least 4 members, including a master builder, a mason, a carpenter, and a laborer. Their duties were explicitly defined. The master builder oversaw all operations, while the mason was tasked with repairing stonework, the carpenter handled wooden structures, and the laborer assisted in various capacities. Financial records and costs. Financial records related to the construction and maintenance of tax offices were maintained with extreme precision. Each project was required to have a designated ledger, known as the tabula edificii, which documented all expenses. These records included line items for materials, labor, and any additional costs incurred. For example, in 726, the construction of a new tax office in the region of Thrace was recorded with the following specifications. Limestone, 10 tons at 2 solidi per ton 20 solidi. Brick, 500 units at 0.5 solidus per unit 250 solidi. Labor costs, 40 days at 5 solidi per day 200 solidi. Miscellaneous expenses, tools, transport, etc. 30 solidi. The total cost amounted to 500 solidi, which was documented in the Imperial Treasury Ledger under the section for provincial expenditures. Personnel and job descriptions. The personnel involved in the tax collection verification process were categorized into various roles, each with specific responsibilities. The position of tax collector, census, was one of the most critical, responsible for the accurate assessment and collection of taxes from local populations. This role required individuals to possess a keen understanding of local economic conditions and tax laws, which were regularly updated. Collectors were often required to undergo training, lasting no less than 6 months, to familiarize themselves with the imperial tax code. In addition to tax collectors, clerks were employed to manage the documentation of payments. Their duties included the recording of receipts, which were issued in triplicate, one for the payer, one for the local tax office, and one to be sent to the central treasury in Constantinople. The clerk's responsibilities extended to reconciling discrepancies in records, which could arise from errors in payment reporting or clerical mistakes. By the year 800, the clerical staff had expanded to include at least one scribe for every 5 tax collectors, ensuring that documentation was accurately maintained. Technical specifications. Technical specifications for the construction of tax collection offices were codified in a series of imperial edicts. These specifications included the design of the buildings, which were to incorporate specific architectural features such as high ceilings to accommodate ventilation, and large windows to ensure adequate natural light. The windows were to be constructed with glass panes, introduced in the empire during the late 6th century, with each pane measuring roughly 1 square meter. The layout of the offices was standardized to facilitate the workflow of tax collection. Each office contained a designated area for the tax collector, a secure storage space for financial records, and a public area for taxpayers to submit their payments. In 867, a new guideline stipulated that payment counters must be at least 1 meter high to prevent tampering, with a sliding compartment for the exchange of coins and receipts. To ensure transparency and security in financial transactions, the Byzantine government mandated the use of specific seals on all receipts. These seals, typically made from wax and stamped with the imperial insignia, measured 5 centimeters in diameter and served to validate the authenticity of the documents. A detailed description of the seal's design was recorded in the Codex of Imperial Seals, which outlined the precise pattern and inscription required. Conclusion. In conclusion, the Byzantine tax collection verification procedures, while seemingly mundane, were characterized by a meticulous approach to construction, maintenance, financial record-keeping, personnel management, and technical specifications. Each aspect was interwoven into a larger framework that underscored the empire's commitment to maintaining fiscal order and imperial authority. The regulations and practices established during this period laid the groundwork for future administrative systems, demonstrating the importance of bureaucratic rigor in the longevity of the Byzantine Empire. The detailed nature of these processes, though devoid of dramatic narrative, reflects the complexities of governance in one of history's most enduring empires. The Byzantine Empire, renowned for its complex bureaucratic structures, implemented a comprehensive system for tax collection verification that extended to various aspects of construction, maintenance, financial documentation, personnel management, and technical specifications. Each of these elements played an integral role in ensuring the efficient management of tax revenues, which were vital for sustaining the imperial treasury and, by extension, the stability of the empire. Construction management and tax validation. One of the key areas where tax verification was critical was in construction management. The Byzantine Empire, particularly during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565 AD, undertook massive building projects, including the construction of the Hagia Sophia in 537 AD. The complexities involved in these projects required meticulous financial oversight. The imperial government established a detailed set of regulations for contractors, which included rigorous assessments of materials, labor costs, and time frames. For instance, the Novelli, new laws, issued by Justinian mandated that all construction projects over a specified budget required an official audit to confirm that tax revenues were properly allocated and spent. This included measuring the quantities of marble, bricks, and other materials used, as well as the number of laborers employed for the project. In 558 AD, the construction of the Church of St. John in Ephesus exemplified this process. The project was funded through local taxes, requiring the local governor to submit detailed reports on the allocation of funds and the progress of construction. The Byzantine bureaucracy emphasized accountability and transparency, ensuring that tax revenues were used effectively and minimizing opportunities for corruption. Maintenance and upkeep. The maintenance of public infrastructure was another area where tax verification played a crucial role. Roads, aqueducts, and fortifications required ongoing funding and resources. In 532 AD, the Nika riots led to extensive damage to Constantinople, necessitating significant expenditures for repair and reconstruction. The government employed a system called curia, which involved local officials conducting surveys to assess damage and determine the necessary funds for repairs. This system ensured that tax revenues collected from local populations were directly reinvested into the community, thereby maintaining public trust and compliance with tax obligations. One notable example is the reconstruction of the Theodosian walls after the Nika riots. Officials were tasked with documenting the materials and labor necessary for the restoration, which were then cross-verified with tax records. This rigorous approach to accountability helped stabilize the empire during a period of unrest. Financial documentation and personnel management. The Byzantine Empire also excelled in financial documentation, which was essential for tracking tax revenues. The logothetes, finance ministers, were responsible for maintaining detailed records of all financial transactions. From 800 AD onward, the empire implemented a double-entry bookkeeping system that allowed for greater accuracy in financial reporting. This method, which was advanced for its time, ensured that every tax collected was documented against expenditures, providing a clear picture of the empire's financial health. Personnel management was equally important in tax collection. Local tax collectors, known as strateades, were selected based on their integrity and efficiency. These officials were required to provide regular reports on tax collection activities, including the number of taxpayers, the amounts collected, and any discrepancies in the records. For instance, in the province of Thrace, tax collectors were held accountable for discrepancies as small as a single gold coin, reflecting the Byzantine commitment to financial integrity. Technical specifications and standardization. Technical specifications were standardized across various sectors, particularly in construction and public works. In 726 AD, Emperor Leo III introduced a series of regulations known as the Ecloga, which set specific guidelines for construction materials and techniques. This standardization ensured that all projects adhered to the same quality and safety standards, which was crucial for maintaining public infrastructure. Additionally, the Byzantine Empire's use of architectural styles that incorporated both Greek and Roman elements can be seen in the construction of the Church of St. Mary of Blacherny, which served as a model for subsequent ecclesiastical buildings. The meticulous documentation of these styles also played a role in tax verification, as it allowed for accurate assessments of material costs and labor. Historical context of tax systems. Historically, the Byzantine tax system evolved significantly from its Roman predecessors. By the 9th century, the empire had adopted a more decentralized approach, allowing local officials some autonomy in tax collection. This shift was partly a response to the challenges posed by external threats, such as the rise of the Seljuk Turks and the Muslim conquests, which necessitated a more agile administrative framework. In conclusion, the Byzantine Empire's comprehensive system for tax collection verification was a multifaceted process that involved construction management, maintenance, financial documentation, personnel management, and technical specifications. This intricate bureaucracy not only ensured the efficient management of tax revenues but also contributed to the overall stability and longevity of the empire, reflecting its ability to adapt and thrive in a complex historical landscape. The construction of tax collection facilities during the Byzantine Empire was governed by a set of standardized methods and materials that reflected both the architectural preferences of the time and the practical needs of the tax collection process. Generally, the construction of these facilities, often referred to as tax offices or logisti, occurred in urban centers where tax revenues were most concentrated. Between the 6th and 11th centuries, the predominant materials used in construction included locally sourced limestone, brick, and timber. The use of limestone was favored due to its durability and availability in regions such as Asia Minor and the Balkans. Brick, often fired at high temperatures, provided a strong and weather-resistant alternative, particularly in coastal areas. The typical dimensions of a tax office were approximately 12 meters in length and 6 meters in width, allowing for sufficient space to accommodate clerks, tax assessors, and the necessary documentation. The design of these structures generally included a central hall for public interactions, flanked by private offices for the personnel tasked with overseeing tax collection. The roofs were typically constructed from wooden beams, often covered with clay tiles, which measured around 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. This architectural style persisted largely unchanged from circa 500 AD to 1000 AD, reflecting a commitment to both functionality and aesthetic uniformity across the empire. Maintenance procedures for these facilities were systematic and detailed, ensuring that the buildings remained functional and secure. Regular inspections were mandated at least twice a year, with a focus on structural integrity and the condition of roofing materials. Maintenance records, which were meticulously kept, included detailed accounts of repairs and costs. For example, a report from 850 AD documents the replacement of roofing tiles at a cost of 15 solidi, with labor provided by local craftsmen who were compensated with food and a nominal fee of 1 solidus per day. Financial records were foundational to the operation of the tax collection system. Each tax office maintained a comprehensive ledger, known as the logismos, which recorded all incoming and outgoing funds. These ledgers were divided into several sections, including a detailed account of tax revenues, expenditures on maintenance, and salaries for personnel. It was common for these records to be updated on a weekly basis, with entries made in a format standardized by the imperial treasury. The average annual income recorded in these ledgers fluctuated but typically ranged from 2,000 to 5,000 solidi per office, depending on the region and economic conditions. The personnel responsible for tax collection and management were categorized into specific roles, each with distinct job descriptions. The chief officer, known as the logists, oversaw the entire operation of the tax office. This individual was typically a well-educated male, often with a background in law or administration, and was responsible for ensuring compliance with imperial tax laws. The logists was supported by a team of clerks, usually numbering between 3 to 5, who handled day-to-day transactions, documentation, and public inquiries. Each clerk was expected to possess basic literacy and numeracy skills, with many having undergone formal training. In addition to clerks, the tax offices employed scribes who were responsible for the precise documentation of tax assessments and payment receipts. These scribes, often trained in specialized schools, utilized quills and ink made from local materials, with ink recipes dating back to antiquity. The typical ink used during this period was carbon-based, produced from soot mixed with water and a binding agent, such as gum arabic. The use of parchment or papyrus as writing surfaces was common, with records usually maintained in a size of approximately 20 cm by 30 cm, allowing for efficient storage within the confines of the tax office. Technical specifications for the documentation involved in tax collection were also rigorously defined. Each payment receipt, or apography, included specific fields: the date of payment, the name of the taxpayer, the amount paid, and the purpose of the tax. The standard form size for these receipts was 15 cm by 10 cm, allowing for easy handling and storage. Receipts were often signed by both the logists and the taxpayer to ensure authenticity and to provide a verifiable record of the transaction. The use of official seals, typically made from wax with an embossed insignia of the Byzantine state, further authenticated these documents and prevented forgery. The verification procedures for tax collection were equally meticulous. Each office was required to conduct a biannual audit, which involved a comprehensive review of all financial records against physical assets. This audit was typically conducted by a team appointed from the Central Treasury, often comprising experienced auditors who traveled to various regions. The auditors would compare receipts with ledger entries, ensuring that all recorded payments matched the actual funds collected. Any discrepancies discovered during this process were documented in a report, which was submitted to the Central Treasury for review. The audits from the year 950 AD, for instance, revealed an average discrepancy rate of approximately 2%, which was considered acceptable and indicative of a well-functioning system. Moreover, the empire employed a decentralized approach to tax collection, whereby local governors, known as strategies, played a crucial role in overseeing the operations of tax offices within their jurisdictions. These officials were responsible for ensuring that local tax assessments were fair and consistent with imperial standards. Local councils, composed of community leaders, often provided input into tax rates, creating a degree of local governance in what was otherwise a highly centralized system. The relationship between the strategies and the logists was formalized through regular correspondence, with letters exchanged to discuss revenue targets and any issues arising from tax collection efforts. The financial implications of these procedures were profound. It is estimated that the Byzantine Empire generated an annual tax revenue of approximately 30 million solidi during the peak of its power in the 10th century. This revenue was critical for funding military campaigns, public works, and administrative expenses. The costs associated with maintaining tax offices, including personnel salaries and facility upkeep, were carefully budgeted. For example, in 1025 AD, the combined cost of salaries for clerks and scribes across the empire averaged around 200 solidi annually per office, a figure that had remained relatively stable over the preceding century. The Byzantine approach to tax collection thus reflects a broader commitment to administrative efficiency and fiscal responsibility. The empire's ability to sustain itself through a complex, multifaceted tax collection system was not merely a function of its bureaucratic machinery but also an essential element of its political stability. The diligent recording of financial transactions ensured accountability, while the construction and maintenance of tax offices demonstrated a commitment to public service. The legacy of these practices can be seen in the administrative systems of subsequent empires, which adopted and adapted Byzantine methodologies for their own tax collection processes. In conclusion, the construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel roles, and technical specifications surrounding Byzantine imperial tax collection procedures reveal a highly organized and methodical approach to governance. This system not only facilitated the collection of revenues essential for the empire's survival but also exemplified a broader historical narrative of institutional resilience and adaptability. The attention to detail in each aspect of tax collection underscores the Byzantine Empire's understanding of the intricate relationship between effective governance and economic prosperity. The Byzantine Empire, known for its complex administrative structures, employed various construction methods and materials in the establishment and maintenance of its tax collection facilities. The architecture of these buildings was often dictated by both functionality and durability, with a preference for local materials that ensured structural integrity over time. Stone, particularly limestone and marble, was frequently utilized due to its abundance in the region, allowing for the construction of robust edifices that could withstand the test of time. Between the 4th and 6th centuries CE, it was common to find tax collection offices constructed with walls that were at least 1.2 meters thick, ensuring security and longevity. The roofs of these structures were typically made of clay tiles, which not only provided effective weatherproofing but also promoted thermal regulation within the building. The use of wooden beams, often sourced from the nearby forests, was prevalent in the interior framework, allowing for larger open spaces conducive to the bureaucratic functions of tax collection. In addition, the flooring was generally constructed from large stone slabs, which were easier to clean and maintain, an important consideration given the high volume of foot traffic these offices experienced. Maintenance procedures for these tax collection facilities were meticulously documented, reflecting the Byzantine emphasis on preserving state properties. Routine inspections were mandated every 5 years, focusing on both structural integrity and aesthetics. Specific tasks included checking for cracks in the walls, ensuring the roofs were intact, and verifying that drainage systems were functional to prevent water damage. A budget of approximately 10% of the annual operational costs was typically allocated for maintenance, underscoring the importance placed on these facilities. Records from the year 523 CE indicate that a significant amount of resources was spent on the repair of a prominent tax office in Constantinople, where costs reached 500 solidi for structural enhancements and repairs. The financial records associated with tax collection were extensive and detailed, reflecting the Byzantine commitment to fiscal transparency. Each tax collection facility was required to maintain ledgers documenting daily receipts, expenditures, and personnel costs. The use of papyrus and parchment for record keeping was prevalent until the 8th century, when the introduction of more durable materials, such as paper, began to emerge. By the year 600 CE, it was common for these ledgers to be organized by month, with separate sections for different types of taxes, including land tax, poll tax, and import duties. Furthermore, the costs associated with tax collection were meticulously itemized. For instance, in 565 CE, it was recorded that the cost of maintaining a single tax collection office in the province of Asia Minor amounted to approximately 1,200 solidi annually. This included not only maintenance but also personnel salaries, which were outlined in the financial records. The average salary for a tax collector at this time was approximately 200 solidi per year, while the clerks responsible for maintaining documentation earned around 100 solidi. The personnel involved in the tax collection process were categorized into specific roles, each with distinct job descriptions. The primary role was held by the tax collector, beta alpha sigma iota lambda iota kappa lambda epsilon gamma kappa tau, who was responsible for overseeing the entire tax collection process and ensuring accuracy in the reporting of taxes. This position required a thorough understanding of local laws and tax codes, which were often complex and subject to change. Tax collectors were typically appointed after demonstrating proficiency in accounting and bureaucratic procedures, often having served in related roles for several years. Supporting the tax collector were clerks, gamma rho alpha mu mu alpha tau iota kappa omicron, who maintained the records of tax receipts and expenditures. These clerks were expected to have a high degree of literacy and numeracy, as they frequently transcribed financial documents and compiled reports for the tax collector. The role of the clerk was critical, as errors in documentation could lead to significant financial discrepancies and potential legal consequences. Additionally, there were inspectors, Xi epsilon tau alpha sigma tau alpha, whose role was to ensure compliance with tax laws and verify that collections were made according to established protocols. Inspectors conducted audits of tax records and physical inspections of tax collection offices every 3 years, which involved reviewing the accuracy of ledgers and confirming that all collected taxes had been properly reported. Technical specifications for the operation of tax collection facilities were established in accordance with the Byzantine administrative codes. Each facility was required to be equipped with basic furnishings, including desks for clerks, secure storage for financial records, and a public area for taxpayers. Desks were typically constructed from oak and measured approximately 1.5 meters in length, providing adequate space for clerical work. The storage vaults were lined with iron, and doors were reinforced to prevent unauthorized access, reflecting the importance of safeguarding financial documentation. In terms of documentation timelines, the Byzantine tax collection system mandated specific intervals for the submission of reports. Tax collectors were required to submit monthly reports detailing their collections, which were then reviewed by provincial governors. A comprehensive annual report was expected by the end of each fiscal year, typically on the 1st of January. This annual report included a summary of total taxes collected, broken down by category, and was often accompanied by a detailed ledger outlining individual transactions. The meticulous nature of these procedures illustrates the Byzantine Empire's commitment to maintaining a sophisticated bureaucratic apparatus that facilitated effective tax collection. The emphasis on documentation and verification procedures was not merely an exercise in diligence, it was a critical component of ensuring economic stability and public trust in the imperial administration. In conclusion, the Byzantine approach to imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation was characterized by a structured and methodical framework. From the construction and maintenance of tax collection facilities to the detailed financial records and clearly delineated personnel roles, every aspect was designed to promote efficiency and accountability. The technical specifications governing these operations further highlight the empire's advanced understanding of administrative governance, which ultimately contributed to its economic resilience and longevity. The Byzantine Empire, which lasted from approximately 330 AD to 1453 AD, was renowned not only for its rich cultural legacy and complex governance but also for its sophisticated approach to architecture and construction, particularly in the realm of tax collection facilities. These buildings played a crucial role in the empire's economic stability, serving as centers for the collection and administration of taxes, which were essential for funding the Byzantine military and civil services. The architectural style of tax collection facilities in the Byzantine era was heavily influenced by the empire's Roman heritage. The use of classical architectural elements, such as columns and arches, was prevalent, yet Byzantine architects also incorporated unique features that reflected the empire's distinct cultural identity. For instance, the tax offices often showcased intricate mosaics and frescoes that depicted scenes of prosperity and the emperor's divine right to rule, thereby reinforcing the legitimacy of the taxation process. From the 4th century onwards, particularly after the establishment of Constantinople as the capital in 330 AD, the Byzantine administration began to implement a more organized structure for tax collection. The diocesan system, formalized by Emperor Diocletian in the late 3rd century, divided the empire into smaller units, making it easier to manage tax collection. Each province, or diocese, had designated tax offices, which were strategically located in urban centers to facilitate access for taxpayers. One prominent example of such a structure is the tax office of Alexandria, established around 395 AD. This facility was not only responsible for collecting taxes from a diverse population but also acted as a hub for economic activity in one of the empire's most vital cities. The office utilized local limestone for its construction, which was both durable and abundant in the region. The building featured a large central hall for public interactions, flanked by smaller administrative rooms where clerks managed financial records and tax disputes. The roof was supported by a series of robust columns, exemplifying the architectural ingenuity of the time. The Byzantine tax system was highly organized, with specific measurements and regulations in place. For instance, the indite ion cycle, a 15-year period used for assessing property taxes, allowed for systematic evaluations of land and goods. Tax assessors, often appointed from the local populace, would measure arable land using the iugerum, a Roman unit equivalent to approximately 0.25 acres. This meticulous approach ensured that tax rates were reflective of the economic capacity of each region. In addition to stone, wood was commonly used in the construction of tax facilities, particularly for interior structures and roofing. The Byzantine craftsmen employed advanced woodworking techniques, such as joinery and the use of wooden beams, to create durable roofs that could withstand the region's varying climatic conditions. This combination of local materials not only facilitated cost-effective construction but also ensured that the buildings could endure the test of time. As the Byzantine Empire evolved, so too did its tax collection methods. By the 10th century, during the reign of Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitos, the empire saw an expansion of its bureaucratic apparatus. A comprehensive manual titled De Administrando Imperio outlined the administration of various provinces and included detailed instructions on tax collection processes. This document serves as a vital historical source, providing insights into the complexities of Byzantine governance and the architectural requirements of tax facilities during this period. Moreover, the construction of tax offices was often accompanied by a range of ancillary buildings. These included storage rooms for tax goods, such as grain and precious metals, as well as living quarters for tax officials. The tax office of Constantinople, for instance, featured a series of interconnected buildings that housed not only the tax collectors but also clerks and guards. The layout was designed to promote efficiency, with easy access to the main collection hall and secure areas for storing valuable tax revenues. In summary, the Byzantine Empire's tax collection facilities were more than mere administrative buildings. They were a reflection of the empire's architectural prowess, economic strategies, and social structures. Through the careful selection of materials, innovative construction techniques, and an organized bureaucratic framework, these facilities played a pivotal role in maintaining the empire's economic health and stability. The legacy of Byzantine architectural practices, particularly in the context of tax collection, continues to influence modern governance and public administration today. The construction methods and materials utilized in Byzantine tax collection facilities were characterized by a pragmatic approach that aimed to ensure durability and functional efficiency. The structures were often built using locally sourced materials, particularly limestone and brick, a practice that began in the early 4th century AD and became standardized by the 6th century. The use of limestone, which was abundant in regions such as the Thracian Peninsula, offered a combination of strength and thermal mass, enabling the buildings to withstand both the elements and the pressures of time. Byzantine architects employed a variety of construction techniques, including the use of arches and vaults, which were integral to the structural integrity of the tax collection buildings. The introduction of the pointed arch in the 7th century allowed for greater heights and more expansive interior spaces, facilitating the organization of tax collection activities with increased efficiency. The typical tax collection office, or dikonikion, was often rectangular in shape, measuring approximately 20 meters by 10 meters, with a ceiling height of around 4 meters, allowing for adequate airflow and light. The walls were commonly adorned with simple frescoes depicting allegorical representations of justice and prosperity, meant to remind tax officials of their duties. Maintenance procedures for these structures were outlined in detailed documentation that existed within the Byzantine bureaucratic system. Regular inspections were mandated, occurring biannually, to assess the structural integrity of the buildings and to ensure that the facilities remained functional. These inspections included checking for signs of wear such as cracks in the walls, water damage caused by leaks, and the condition of the roofs, which were typically made of flat tiles designed to channel rainwater effectively. Maintenance protocols stipulated that any identified issues should be addressed within a period not exceeding 30 days. The costs associated with repairs, which were usually documented in a ledger, were typically derived from the local tax revenues, emphasizing the interconnectedness of tax collection and building maintenance. Financial records pertaining to the construction and maintenance of tax collection offices were meticulously kept, reflecting the Byzantine Empire's emphasis on bureaucratic precision. Each building's construction budget was prepared in detail, often enumerating costs associated with materials, labor, and any auxiliary expenses. For instance, in the year 550 AD, the construction of a Dicynicion in Constantinople incurred costs totaling approximately 1,500 solidi, a currency that was regularly used throughout the empire. This amount included 800 solidi for labor, 500 solidi for materials, and 200 solidi for miscellaneous expenses such as transportation of goods and minor architectural embellishments. The personnel involved in the operation of these tax collection facilities included a variety of job descriptions that were well defined in administrative documents. The head official, known as the logothetes tou genikou, was responsible for overseeing all tax collection activities and ensuring compliance with imperial regulations. This individual typically held a position of considerable prestige, often requiring a minimum of 15 years of experience within the Byzantine administrative framework. Beneath the logothetes, there were clerks, grammates, who managed the financial records, handling the documentation of tax receipts, and maintaining detailed ledgers that recorded both incoming revenues and outgoing expenditures. The clerks were assisted by a cadre of assistants, referred to as hypogrammateus, who were tasked with the physical organization of documents, filing tax receipts, and managing correspondence with local officials. These assistants were often young men, often aged between 18 and 25, who had undergone basic education in reading and writing, a skill that was highly valued in Byzantine society. The detailed job descriptions outlined in the Byzantine administrative manual specified that clerks were required to possess a thorough understanding of tax law, enabling them to interpret and apply regulations accurately. Technical specifications for the buildings housing the tax collection operations were documented in architectural treatises, which provided guidelines for construction techniques, spatial organization, and materials. The typical Dicynicion was designed with a central hall intended for public interaction, flanked by smaller rooms designated for administrative tasks, storage of financial records, and secure areas for the safekeeping of collected taxes. The central hall measured approximately 12 meters by 8 meters and was equipped with a raised dais for the logothetes, allowing for visibility during public hearings and consultations. The flooring of these buildings was often made of mosaic tiles, a popular choice that not only added aesthetic value but also facilitated easy cleaning, an important factor in maintaining a hygienic environment. Mosaics typically depicted geometric patterns or agricultural scenes, reflecting the agrarian basis of the Byzantine economy. The installation of these mosaics required skilled artisans, whose labor costs were factored into the overall budgets for construction projects. Additionally, the technical specifications included provisions for ventilation systems, which were particularly crucial given the often stuffy conditions of the tax offices. Simple window designs with shutters allowed for airflow during warmer months, while large doorways facilitated movement of personnel and materials. The orientation of buildings was carefully considered to maximize natural light, which was vital for clerical work conducted during daylight hours. The financial documentation surrounding the operations of these tax collection facilities was extensive and included a variety of forms and receipts. The apodosis, or tax receipt, was a critical document that recorded the amount of tax paid by an individual or entity, detailing the type of tax, the amount collected, and the date of payment. Each receipt was issued in triplicate, one copy for the taxpayer, one for local records, and one for the central administration. The use of triplicate receipts became common practice by the 8th century AD, a move intended to enhance accountability and reduce opportunities for corruption among tax collectors. The costs associated with the printing and distribution of these tax forms, including the ink and parchment, were itemized in the financial records. For example, in the year 600 AD, a budget for the production of apodosis forms included 300 solidi for parchment, 150 solidi for ink, and 50 solidi allocated for clerical labor involved in the distribution process. This meticulous approach to record-keeping ensured that tax revenues could be accurately tracked, facilitating the empire's broader economic strategies. Moreover, the personnel involved in these processes were trained in the use of specific accounting methods. The logists, or accountants, were responsible for reconciling financial records with actual collections, a task that required a keen eye for detail and a thorough understanding of the Byzantine tax code. These accountants were often educated in the imperial schools, and their training emphasized the importance of mathematical proficiency and ethical conduct in financial matters. They utilized a system of tally sticks to track payments, marking notches that corresponded to received sums, a practice that dated back to earlier Roman accounting traditions. In summary, the construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel organization, and technical specifications surrounding Byzantine tax collection facilities reveal a highly structured and methodical approach to governance and public administration. The interplay between architectural practices and the procedures for tax collection not only reflects the economic health of the Byzantine Empire but also highlights the enduring legacy of these practices in the evolution of modern bureaucratic systems. Through an examination of these aspects, one gains insight into the complexities and intricacies that characterized Byzantine tax administration, a topic that remains of marginal interest to contemporary scholars yet serves as a foundation for understanding the development of state governance in various historical contexts. The dull history of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines has thus far traversed the initial phases of tax collection within the Byzantine Empire, elucidating the intricate frameworks established in Parts 3, 4, and 5. In this segment, we delve into the regional variations and comparisons of tax collection practices, the evolution of these practices across different periods, the bureaucratic regulations and laws that undergirded them, the complexities of supply chain and logistics, and the meticulous methods of record-keeping integral to this vast administrative undertaking. Regional variations and comparisons. The Byzantine Empire was a vast and diverse entity, encompassing various regions, each with its own peculiarities in tax collection. For instance, in the provinces of Asia Minor, the tax system exhibited a certain degree of leniency, influenced by the agrarian nature of the economy. Tax collectors, known as apographes, were often local landowners or prominent figures in the community, which created a more personalized approach to tax collection. These local tax collectors enjoyed a degree of autonomy, enabling them to negotiate payment timelines directly with taxpayers, often leading to a more flexible collection process. In contrast, the cities of Thrace and Macedonia, which were more urbanized and economically vibrant, adhered to a more standardized tax collection procedure. Here, the imperial administration maintained tighter control, employing bureaucrats who followed stringent protocols. The urban tax collectors were required to submit detailed reports to the central administration in Constantinople, detailing the amounts collected and any discrepancies encountered. This difference in approach highlights a fundamental aspect of Byzantine tax policy, the balance between local autonomy and imperial oversight. Moreover, the administrative practices in the distant provinces, such as Egypt and the Balkans, reflected a hybrid model. In Egypt, for instance, the tax collection process was heavily influenced by the legacy of Roman administrative practices. The local populace was accustomed to a more systematic approach, characterized by regular assessments and a clear delineation of tax obligations. Egyptian tax collectors, often appointed from the ranks of local bureaucrats, had to navigate a complicated landscape of agricultural output, which involved the meticulous cataloging of harvest yields and market prices. Comparisons between these regions reveal not only the diversity of tax practices but also the underlying socio-economic conditions that shaped them. For example, regions with a higher concentration of agriculture tended to implement a capitation tax system, where the tax was assessed per individual or household, while regions with burgeoning trade networks leaned towards a more transactional tax model, such as the merchant's tax, which was levied based on the volume of goods traded. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of tax collection verification procedures in the Byzantine Empire can be segmented into several distinct periods, each marked by significant socio-political changes. The early Byzantine period, following the establishment of the empire in 330 AD, was characterized by a relatively straightforward tax system that mirrored Roman practices. During this time, the tax collection was predominantly agrarian-focused, with the primary tax being the land tax, agrarian on asterisk, which was assessed based on the size of cultivated land and the productivity of the soil. As the empire expanded and encountered various external pressures, including invasions from the Slavs and the rise of Islam, the tax system underwent substantial transformations. The Middle Byzantine period, spanning from the 9th to the 12th centuries, saw the introduction of more complex tax structures, including the chrysargeron, a tax on silver, and the charagion, a tax on trade. This era was marked by a burgeoning bureaucracy, with an increased emphasis on documentation and record-keeping to facilitate tax collection. The late Byzantine period, particularly during the 13th century, brought about a further evolution in tax collection practices, influenced by economic decline and social unrest. The fiscal demands on the populace increased, leading to the implementation of more rigorous verification procedures. Tax collectors were now required to provide detailed receipts to taxpayers, which included not only the amount paid but also the purpose of the payment and the relevant imperial decree authorizing the tax. This period also saw the emergence of the logothetes, a class of financial officials responsible for overseeing tax collection across different regions, ensuring compliance with imperial standards. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine tax system was underpinned by a complex web of bureaucratic regulations and laws, meticulously codified to ensure consistency and adherence to imperial directives. The Basilica, a compilation of laws established under Emperor Basil I in the 9th century, laid the groundwork for tax regulations and stipulated the responsibilities of tax collectors. It emphasized the necessity for transparency and accountability in tax collection, mandating that all transactions be recorded in a logismos, or ledger. Additionally, the Ecloga, a legal code introduced by Emperor Leo III, provided further clarity on tax obligations, specifying the rights of taxpayers and the limits of tax collectors' authority. This legal framework was crucial in establishing a sense of trust between the imperial administration and the populace, particularly as the empire faced increasing challenges from external adversaries. The regulations also included detailed guidelines on the verification of tax payments, such as the requirement that tax collectors issue official receipts, ****, for every payment made. These receipts not only served as proof of payment but also included unique identifiers, such as a seal or signature, to prevent fraud and ensure that the funds were directed to the imperial treasury. Supply chain and logistics. The logistical aspects of Byzantine tax collection were as intricate as they were essential. The supply chain involved not only the collection of taxes but also the transportation of funds and goods to various administrative centers. Tax collectors often had to navigate challenging terrains, especially in rural provinces, where access to remote villages could be hampered by natural obstacles or banditry. The Byzantine administration established a series of protocols to ensure that tax revenues reached the imperial treasury efficiently. For instance, it was common practice for tax collectors to employ local couriers to transport receipts and payment documentation to larger towns or cities where regional bureaucratic offices were located. This practice necessitated a careful selection of couriers, who were often trusted individuals from the community, known for their reliability and discretion. Additionally, the logistics of tax collection also included the management of goods collected as taxes. Agricultural produce, for instance, was often collected in kind, leading to the establishment of storage facilities known as apotheke. These facilities were strategically located to facilitate the distribution of goods and to ensure that the tax revenues could be converted into usable assets for the imperial treasury. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping in the Byzantine tax system was a critical component of the overall administrative framework. The meticulous documentation of tax payments, receipts, and related correspondence ensured that the empire maintained a comprehensive overview of its financial resources. The primary method of record-keeping involved the use of biblion, or books, where tax collectors were required to enter detailed accounts of their transactions. These records included not only the names of taxpayers and the amounts paid but also annotations regarding any disputes or grievances raised during the collection process. In instances where discrepancies arose, tax collectors were obliged to provide a written explanation, which was then submitted to regional bureaucratic offices for review. The use of clay tablets and wax tablets was also prevalent, especially in the early Byzantine period. These materials allowed for easy erasure and modification of entries, which was a practical solution given the often fluctuating nature of tax obligations. Later, as the empire advanced, parchment and papyrus became the preferred mediums for record-keeping, leading to the development of more sophisticated archival systems. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tax collection system was characterized by a myriad of regional variations, an evolution of practices through different historical periods, a robust framework of bureaucratic regulations and laws, intricate supply chain logistics, and meticulous record-keeping methods. Each of these aspects contributed to the overall functionality and effectiveness of the tax collection process, ensuring that the empire could sustain its vast administrative and military apparatus. The complexities involved may appear mundane, yet they reveal the profound intricacies of governance in one of history's most enduring empires, offering an exhaustive insight into the mechanisms that underpin Byzantine imperial authority. The dull history of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines, Part 7. Regional variations and comparisons. The Byzantine Empire, encompassing a diverse array of territories, showcased a plethora of regional variations in its tax collection procedures and documentation practices. This diversity can be attributed to several factors, including local customs, economic conditions, and the varying degrees of administrative oversight exercised by the central government in Constantinople. In the eastern provinces, particularly those bordering the Persian Empire, tax collection was often characterized by a more militant approach due to the constant threat of external invasions. Here, tax collectors, known as apographes, were often accompanied by military contingents to ensure compliance and mitigate any potential resistance from local populations. This military oversight necessitated meticulous documentation of tax receipts, which were often inscribed on durable materials such as bamboo or clay tablets to withstand the rigors of transport in less hospitable environments. Conversely, in the wealthier western provinces, such as Italy and the Balkans, a more sophisticated and bureaucratic approach to tax collection emerged. The local aristocracy often played a significant role in tax assessment and collection, frequently acting as intermediaries between the imperial authorities and the peasantry. In these regions, the use of parchment for record-keeping became commonplace, allowing for more detailed documentation, including the inclusion of annotations and amendments concerning payment schedules, tax exemptions, and disputes. Additionally, the regional variations in tax burdens also influenced the manner in which taxes were collected. In agricultural areas, the focus was primarily on land taxes, requiring the documentation of crop yields and land productivity. In contrast, urban centers, which thrived on trade and commerce, relied more heavily on trade tariffs and poll taxes, necessitating detailed ledgers of merchant transactions and demographic records. Evolution over different time periods. The Byzantine tax collection system evolved significantly from its inception during the early Byzantine period, approximately the 4th to 6th centuries, through the Middle Byzantine period, approximately the 7th to 12th centuries, and into the Late Byzantine period, approximately the 13th to 15th centuries. Each of these periods was marked by distinct shifts in both the political landscape and economic conditions, leading to corresponding changes in taxation practices and documentation procedures. During the early Byzantine period, tax collection was largely a matter of local governance, with local officials wielding considerable power in assessing and collecting taxes. The central government played a relatively passive role, primarily concerned with receiving revenues rather than managing the intricate details of tax collection. Consequently, documentation practices were rudimentary, often limited to basic ledgers maintained by local scribes. As the empire faced increasing external pressures, particularly during the Middle Byzantine period, the central government began to assert greater control over tax collection. This shift was largely a response to the need for a more organized defense strategy and the financial demands of maintaining a standing army. The introduction of the logothetes, as a central bureaucratic figure responsible for overseeing tax collection, marked a significant evolution in the system. The logothetes were tasked with creating standardized forms and documentation practices, which included the detailed recording of tax assessments, payment receipts, and exemptions. By the late Byzantine period, the decline of central authority due to external invasions and internal strife led to a fragmentation of tax collection practices. Local lords and nobility increasingly took control of tax collection, often leading to the establishment of their own documentation methods, which varied widely across regions. This decentralization resulted in an increasingly complex and convoluted system, where the central government's ability to verify tax compliance diminished significantly. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine Empire's extensive bureaucratic framework was supported by a myriad of regulations and laws governing tax collection and documentation. These regulations evolved over time, reflecting the changing political and economic climates of the empire. The Codex Justinianus, compiled under Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century, is one of the most notable legal texts that codified various aspects of tax law, including the responsibilities of tax collectors, the rights of taxpayers, and the procedures for dispute resolution. A particularly important regulation was the procurator, an appointed official tasked with overseeing tax collection in specific regions. The procurator was responsible for ensuring that tax assessments were conducted fairly and that documentation was accurately maintained. This role was critical in maintaining the integrity of the tax collection process, as it provided a level of oversight that helped to mitigate potential abuses by local officials. Moreover, the Byzantine legal framework established specific guidelines for the retention of tax records. For instance, it mandated that payment receipts be preserved for a minimum of 5 years to allow for any potential disputes regarding payment status. This requirement highlighted the importance placed on record-keeping as a means of maintaining transparency and accountability within the tax system. In addition to these laws, the Byzantine Empire also implemented periodic reviews of tax policies to adapt to changing economic conditions. These reviews often resulted in the issuance of new regulations and amendments to existing laws, which further complicated the already intricate bureaucratic landscape. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of tax collection in the Byzantine Empire were as critical as the collection itself, requiring a well-organized supply chain to transport both tax revenues and documentation across vast distances. The empire's extensive road networks, such as the Via Egnatia, facilitated the movement of tax collectors and their records from provincial towns to the imperial treasury in Constantinople. Tax collectors often faced challenges related to the timely and secure transport of both funds and documentation. It was common practice to employ couriers who were specifically trained in the secure handling of sensitive materials. These couriers, known as hypostates, were entrusted with the responsibility of delivering receipts and tax revenues, often traveling in small, well-guarded groups to deter robbers and bandits. Furthermore, the supply chain logistics of tax collection were often intertwined with the agricultural calendar. For instance, land taxes were typically collected after the harvest season, necessitating the coordination of transportation methods to ensure that tax revenues arrived in a timely manner. This required close collaboration between tax collectors and local agricultural leaders to align collection efforts with harvest schedules, thereby reducing the burden on peasant farmers. The logistics of record-keeping also posed significant challenges. Tax receipts and documentation had to be meticulously organized to facilitate efficient audits and verifications. The use of seals, often made from wax or clay, became a common method for securing documents during transport. These seals, imprinted with the insignia of the issuing authority, served as both a form of authentication and a deterrent against tampering. Record-keeping methods. The methods of record-keeping in the Byzantine tax collection system varied significantly across different periods and regions. In the early days of the empire, tax records were primarily maintained on simple clay tablets or waxed wooden tablets, which allowed for easy erasure and modification. However, as the empire expanded and the tax system grew more complex, the need for more durable and sophisticated methods of record-keeping became apparent. By the Middle Byzantine period, the use of parchment became more prevalent, reflecting advancements in writing technology and the increased importance of maintaining accurate records. Parchment, made from animal skins, provided a more reliable medium for documentation compared to clay or wax. The introduction of ink made from carbon or vegetable dyes further enhanced the legibility and longevity of written records. Additionally, the establishment of standardized forms for documentation played a crucial role in improving record-keeping practices. Templates for tax assessment forms, payment receipts, and dispute resolution documents were developed, allowing for greater consistency and uniformity across the empire. These forms typically included fields for essential information, such as the taxpayer's name, the amount owed, payment dates, and the signatures of the collectors involved. Despite these advancements, the record-keeping methods remained susceptible to errors and manipulation. Local officials often had significant discretion in documenting tax assessments, leading to discrepancies in reported revenues. Furthermore, the decentralized nature of tax collection in the late Byzantine period resulted in a patchwork of record-keeping practices, further complicating the verification process for the central authorities. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines exhibit a remarkable degree of complexity and variation. From regional differences in practices to the evolution of bureaucratic regulations, logistical challenges, and record-keeping methods, each aspect contributes to a nuanced understanding of an often overlooked yet vital component of Byzantine governance. As we delve deeper into the minutiae of this history, it becomes evident that the Byzantine approach to tax collection was not merely a financial necessity but a reflection of the empire's broader socio-political dynamics. The Byzantine Empire, with its complex and multifaceted bureaucratic systems, harbored a plethora of regional variations in its tax collection and verification procedures. Understanding these regional distinctions is pivotal in developing a comprehensive view of the Byzantine tax system, which was neither uniformly applied nor uniformly understood. Each region, while adhering to the overarching imperial framework, exhibited unique characteristics influenced by local customs, economic conditions, and administrative exigencies. #Regional variations and comparisons. One of the most salient features of Byzantine tax collection was the disparities among various provinces. For instance, the agricultural heartlands of Asia Minor operated under a distinctly different tax regime compared to the urbanized centers such as Constantinople. In the fertile plains of Anatolia, the tax assessments were primarily based on agricultural yields, with local landowners, known as proedroi, playing a crucial role in the collection process. These local elites were responsible for not only collecting taxes but also for reporting yields to the central administration. This system often led to inflated reports, as local elites sought to curry favor with imperial authorities or retain more wealth for themselves, thus complicating the verification process. In contrast, the urban centers such as Constantinople relied heavily on trade and commerce, leading to a taxation system that emphasized transactional taxes such as tariffs and sales taxes. Here, the bustling marketplaces and trade routes necessitated a different approach to tax verification. The logothetes, financial officers, in Constantinople implemented stringent monitoring of trade activities, often employing inspectors to verify trade volumes and ensure accurate tax collection. This urban-centric method starkly contrasted with the agrarian-focused systems of the provinces, showcasing a fascinating regional bifurcation in Byzantine tax practices. #Evolution over different time periods. The Byzantine tax system underwent significant transformations from the early centuries of the empire into the late period. Initially, during the reign of Justinian I, 527 to 565 CE, the tax system was rather rudimentary. Tax collection was conducted through a system of direct taxes known as capitatio, head tax, and indirect taxes like the centesima rerum, a sales tax. However, as the empire expanded and faced various economic pressures, including wars, plagues, and inflation, the tax system evolved to incorporate more sophisticated methodologies for revenue generation. By the 9th century, the Byzantine administration began to introduce more formalized documentation requirements. Under the influence of bureaucratic reforms initiated by emperors such as Basil II, 976-1025 CE, the process of tax collection became increasingly codified. The introduction of detailed tax rolls and the mandatory issuance of receipts for tax payments were crucial developments. This evolution was partially motivated by the need to curb corruption and ensure accountability among tax collectors. Such changes reflected broader trends in governance, as the empire sought to assert greater control over both its finances and its provincial governors. #Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine tax collection system was underpinned by an intricate web of regulations and laws, which were often codified in comprehensive legal texts. The Ecclesia, a legal code promulgated in the 8th century, served as a foundational document that addressed various aspects of taxation, including the responsibilities of tax collectors and the rights of taxpayers. This code established clear guidelines for the assessment of taxes, stipulating the use of standardized measurement units for agricultural products and the necessity of accurate bookkeeping. Moreover, the Book of the Eparch, a 10th-century manual for urban administrators, provided explicit instructions regarding the collection of taxes in cities. This document emphasized the importance of maintaining detailed records and stipulated the penalties for tax collectors who failed to adhere to these regulations. For instance, tax collectors who were found to have embezzled funds faced severe punishments, including confiscation of property and imprisonment. Such stringent regulations highlighted the Byzantine commitment to transparency and accountability in its fiscal policies. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of tax collection in the Byzantine Empire were intricately linked to the broader supply chain mechanisms that existed within the empire. The transportation of tax revenues, particularly in the form of agricultural goods, necessitated a well-organized logistical framework. Local tax collectors were often responsible for transporting collected goods to regional depots, where they would be stored before being sent to Constantinople or other administrative centers. The transportation of goods was facilitated by an extensive network of roads and waterways, which were crucial for enabling the flow of tax revenues. The Byzantine Empire invested significantly in infrastructure, maintaining roads that connected rural regions to urban centers. This investment allowed for the efficient movement of goods, ensuring that tax revenues could be collected and transported in a timely manner. Furthermore, local governors were expected to oversee the logistics of tax collection, ensuring that taxes were not only collected but also delivered to the central authorities without undue delay. Moreover, the Byzantine Empire employed a system of strategies, military personnel, to assist in tax collection in certain regions. These soldiers were often tasked with escorting tax revenues during transport, particularly in areas where banditry and lawlessness posed a risk to the safe delivery of funds. This military involvement in the logistics of tax collection underscores the interconnectedness of tax policies and broader security concerns within the empire. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping was a cornerstone of Byzantine tax administration, and the methods employed were typically labor-intensive and meticulously detailed. Tax collectors, or collites, were required to maintain extensive records of all transactions, documenting every payment received and every tax levied. These records were kept in logaria, ledgers, which were often bound in leather and filled with parchment pages. The use of ink made from carbon and other natural materials was prevalent, ensuring that records were durable and could withstand the passage of time. The importance of record-keeping extended beyond mere compliance. It was vital for the verification processes that characterized Byzantine tax collection. Each entry in the ledgers was typically cross-referenced with official imperial decrees, ensuring that local tax collectors operated within the legal frameworks established by the central authority. This meticulous documentation was not only a safeguard against corruption but also a means of providing transparency to both the tax collectors and the taxpayers. The issuance of receipts upon payment further reinforced this transparency, as taxpayers were provided with tangible proof of their compliance with tax obligations. Additionally, the Byzantine Empire employed various methods of archiving these records. Large administrative centers maintained extensive archives, where tax records were stored in a systematic manner. The practice of archiving ensured that historical records were preserved for future reference, which was particularly important in cases of disputes over tax assessments. Taxpayers could refer to archived documents to challenge tax assessments or to verify their compliance, thereby fostering a sense of accountability within the system. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tax collection system represented an intricate and multifaceted enterprise, characterized by regional variations, evolving practices, stringent bureaucratic regulations, complex logistics, and meticulous record-keeping methods. While the mundane aspects of tax collection may seem uninspiring, they collectively underscore the broader themes of governance, accountability, and economic management that were crucial to the survival and prosperity of the Byzantine Empire. The careful orchestration of these elements contributed significantly to the empire's ability to navigate the challenges of its time, ensuring that it remained a formidable power in the Mediterranean world for centuries. The dull history of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines, Part 9. In this continuation of our exhaustive examination into the Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines, we turn our attention to the regional variations and comparisons, the evolution over different time periods, the intricate bureaucratic regulations and laws, the complexities of supply chain and logistics, and the nuanced record-keeping methods employed throughout the Byzantine Empire. Regional variations and comparisons. The Byzantine Empire, encompassing a vast geographical area, exhibited significant regional variations in tax collection verification procedures and documentation practices. The provinces, such as Thrace, Asia Minor, and Egypt, each presented distinct challenges and methodologies due to their unique economic structures, cultural influences, and administrative frameworks. In Thrace, for example, the tax system was heavily influenced by its proximity to the Danube River, which served as both a trade route and a natural boundary. Tax collectors in this region had to navigate the complexities of agricultural taxation, particularly pertaining to the production of grains, which were subject to fluctuating yields based on seasonal conditions. Verification procedures often involved local landowners who acted as intermediaries, providing receipts that documented the quantity and quality of grain harvested. These receipts were then cross-referenced with the imperial tax registers. Conversely, in Egypt, the tax collection process was more centralized due to the highly organized nature of its agricultural economy, particularly its reliance on the annual inundation of the Nile. The tax collectors employed a sophisticated system of measurement using the tharura, a unit of land area, to assess agricultural output. Verification procedures involved meticulous record-keeping of individual farms and their respective yields, often resulting in extensive documentation that required multiple layers of approval from local officials. When comparing these provinces, it becomes evident that regional customs, economic dependencies, and logistical capabilities heavily influenced the bureaucratic intricacies of tax collection. For example, while Thrace relied on local landowners for verification, Egyptian tax collectors utilized a more direct approach that involved the central administration, leading to differing levels of bureaucracy and potentially varying rates of compliance among the populace. Evolution over different time periods. The Byzantine tax collection system underwent significant transformations from the early Byzantine period through the Middle Byzantine era and into the late Byzantine period, reflecting broader socio-economic changes and shifts in imperial policy. During the early Byzantine period, approximately 330 to 600 CE, tax collection was relatively straightforward, with centralized authorities directly imposing taxes on land and goods. The Indite Ion system, a 15-year cycle used to standardize taxation, was implemented during this time. Tax receipts were handwritten on papyrus or parchment, often in a simple format that included the payer's name, the amount owed, and the date of payment. The verification process was limited, primarily relying on the integrity of local officials. As the empire evolved into the Middle Byzantine period, 600–1204 CE, the complexities of tax collection increased dramatically, driven in part by military expenditures and the need to support an ever-expanding bureaucracy. The introduction of new tax categories, such as the kapnikin, a hearth tax, and various levies on trade, necessitated a more sophisticated verification system. By this time, receipts had evolved to include standardized forms with printed elements, such as official seals and watermarks, to reduce the likelihood of forgery. During the late Byzantine period, 1204 to 1453 CE, following the Fourth Crusade, the tax system faced unprecedented challenges. The administrative infrastructure had been significantly weakened, leading to a reliance on local governance structures that varied greatly in their efficacy. The verification procedures became increasingly decentralized. Local leaders often had the autonomy to set tax rates and manage collections, leading to a patchwork of regulations. Documentation became fragmented, with local receipts often lacking the formalized structure seen in earlier periods. This lack of standardization contributed to confusion and disputes over tax obligations, further complicating the verification process. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine Empire was characterized by a dense web of bureaucratic regulations and laws governing tax collection. The Ekliga, a legal code promulgated in the late 8th century, provided a comprehensive framework for tax obligations, detailing the responsibilities of both collectors and taxpayers. These regulations outlined the procedures for tax assessment, payment schedules, and the penalties for non-compliance, establishing a foundation for the meticulous documentation necessary for the verification process. An essential aspect of these regulations was the requirement for all tax collectors to undergo a rigorous vetting process before appointment. This vetting included background checks and assessments of character, aimed at ensuring that those entrusted with tax collection were both trustworthy and competent. Once appointed, collectors were obligated to maintain detailed records of their activities, including the amounts collected, the names of taxpayers, and the dates of transactions. These records were subject to periodic audits by higher authorities, creating a system of checks and balances that, while cumbersome, was designed to mitigate the risk of fraud. Moreover, various imperial decrees, such as those issued by Emperors Justinian and Basil II, further codified tax regulations, incorporating stipulations regarding complaint procedures for taxpayers. The establishment of the canon, a formalized complaint process, allowed taxpayers to contest their tax assessments and demanded that collectors provide documented justifications for their assessments. This bureaucratic layer aimed to create a semblance of fairness within the tax system, though in practice, it often resulted in lengthy disputes and increased administrative burdens. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of tax collection in the Byzantine Empire extended far beyond the mere gathering of funds. They encompassed a complex supply chain involving communication, transportation, and resource allocation. Collectors were often required to transport collected taxes, often in the form of agricultural goods or precious metals, back to central treasury locations, necessitating a well-coordinated logistical framework. Transportation methods varied widely depending on geography. In urban centers such as Constantinople, tax collectors relied on a network of couriers and waterways to facilitate swift transport of funds. Conversely, in rural areas, goods were often transported via pack animals or caravans, which could be vulnerable to theft or natural obstacles. The logistical challenges were compounded during periods of military unrest or natural disasters, which could disrupt the flow of goods and necessitate adjustments to collection methods. To address these challenges, the Byzantine government invested in infrastructure improvements, such as road construction and maintenance, to enhance the movement of goods. The cursus publicus, an imperial courier system, was established to expedite communication and transportation of collected taxes, ensuring that vital funds reached the treasury in a timely manner. This system involved a series of way stations equipped with horses and supplies, enabling couriers to cover vast distances more efficiently. Record-keeping methods. The record-keeping methods employed in Byzantine tax collection were both diverse and intricate. At the core of these practices was the use of various writing materials, including wax tablets, papyrus, and parchment. Each material had its advantages and drawbacks. For example, wax tablets were reusable and suitable for temporary notes, while papyrus and parchment provided a more permanent solution for official documentation. The emergence of the logismos, a detailed ledger system, marked a significant advancement in tax record keeping. These ledgers contained comprehensive accounts of tax collections, including the names of taxpayers, amounts owed, dates of payment, and the names of collectors. The logismos was often maintained by local clerks, whose training in the art of record-keeping became increasingly formalized through the establishment of administrative schools. In addition to written records, the Byzantine tax collection system also employed visual aids, such as seals and stamps, to authenticate documents. These seals often depicted the imperial emblem or the likeness of the reigning emperor, serving as a tangible assurance of legitimacy. The presence of a seal indicated that a document had passed through the appropriate bureaucratic channels, thereby facilitating trust in the record-keeping process. Furthermore, multiple copies of tax receipts were often generated to ensure redundancy and mitigate the risk of loss or damage. One copy would typically be retained by the collector, while another was given to the taxpayer as proof of payment. A third copy was submitted to the central treasury for archival purposes. This practice highlighted the Byzantine emphasis on meticulous documentation, as the potential for discrepancies between copies could lead to disputes and investigations. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines reflect the intricate interplay between regional practices, evolving bureaucratic regulations, logistical challenges, and sophisticated record-keeping methods. These aspects, while often tedious and mundane, contributed significantly to the overarching stability and functionality of the Byzantine Empire's tax system. As we draw upon the lessons of this history, it is crucial to recognize the underlying complexities that shaped the administrative practices of one of history's most enduring empires. The Byzantine Empire, renowned for its intricate administrative apparatus, exhibited a plethora of regional variations in its tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation. These variations were influenced by local customs, economic conditions, and the degree of centralized control exercised by the imperial government. Consequently, understanding these regional differences is paramount to grasping the broader dynamics of Byzantine tax administration. Regional variations and comparisons. In the provinces of the Byzantine Empire, tax collection was often a reflection of local economic realities and social structures. For instance, in the fertile agricultural regions of Asia Minor, tax collectors, known as logothetes, often relied on a system of in-kind taxation where a portion of the harvest was collected as tribute. This system contrasted sharply with the urban tax practices observed in cities like Constantinople, where monetary taxes predominated, given the concentration of commerce and wealth in urban centers. In regions such as Thrace and Macedonia, the Byzantine state employed a more robust bureaucratic approach, utilizing a network of local officials to ensure compliance with imperial edicts. The presence of military garrisons in these areas further complicated tax collection, as soldiers often required sustenance and resources, necessitating a more elaborate logistical framework to meet the demands of both military and civilian taxation. The provinces of the eastern frontier, including Syria and Palestine, exhibited yet another layer of complexity due to their diverse populations and the effects of intermittent warfare. In these regions, tax collection practices were often subject to the whims of local governors, who might levy additional taxes for military campaigns or other imperial undertakings. This led to a patchwork of tax obligations that could vary significantly even between neighboring towns. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of Byzantine tax collection methods is closely tied to the changing political landscape of the empire. In the early centuries, during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565, tax collection became increasingly centralized. The imperial government sought to standardize tax rates and procedures, leading to the establishment of the Codex Justinianus, which provided a comprehensive legal framework for taxation. Under Justinian, tax collectors were mandated to maintain meticulous records of tax assessments and collections, which laid the groundwork for future bureaucratic practices. However, by the 8th and 9th centuries, the Byzantine Empire began to face significant external pressures, including incursions by Arab and later Turkish forces. This instability necessitated a more flexible approach to tax collection, wherein local officials were granted greater autonomy to adapt tax rates and collection methods to the prevailing circumstances. The Byzantine state increasingly relied on a system of temporary tax relief measures to appease discontented populations, leading to a decline in the uniformity of tax collection practices. The 11th century marked a further shift as the Byzantine state faced economic challenges and territorial losses. The introduction of the pronoia system, wherein land grants were allocated to military commanders in return for military service, fundamentally altered the nature of tax collection. These landholders were responsible for collecting taxes from their tenants, often resulting in a convoluted web of obligations that further obfuscated the imperial revenue stream. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine tax system was governed by a myriad of bureaucratic regulations and laws, which were often meticulously codified. The Epanagoge, a legal text composed in the late 9th century, laid out comprehensive guidelines for tax collection and administration. It emphasized the importance of fairness in tax assessment, mandating that tax collectors provide clear documentation to taxpayers regarding their obligations. To ensure compliance, tax collectors were required to adhere to strict protocols regarding the verification of tax liabilities, which included the use of public registers known as kataskoi. These registers detailed the landholdings of individuals and the corresponding tax obligations, serving as a check against malfeasance and arbitrary taxation. The Byzantine administration frequently conducted audits, referred to as logothesia, to verify the accuracy of tax assessments and to ensure that tax collectors were not engaging in corrupt practices. Moreover, the legal framework surrounding tax collection was often influenced by the prevailing theology of the time. The Byzantine Church played a significant role in tax policy, advocating for the equitable treatment of the populace and the alleviation of burdens on the poor. This led to the establishment of various exemptions and reductions for certain groups, such as clergy and the impoverished, further complicating the tax landscape. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of tax collection in the Byzantine Empire were inherently tied to the empire's expansive supply chains. Collecting taxes in kind necessitated the establishment of an organized system for transporting goods from rural areas to urban centers. The Byzantine state invested in infrastructure, including roads and ports, to facilitate the movement of agricultural products, livestock, and other taxable goods. Tax collectors, often referred to as eparchi, were tasked with overseeing the logistics of tax collection, which included the arrangement of transportation for the collected goods. These officials operated in tandem with local merchants who played an essential role in the redistribution of resources. The Byzantine government often sought to establish partnerships with merchants to ensure efficient tax collection and to mitigate the potential for loss or spoilage of perishable goods during transport. The centralization of tax collection logistics also extended to the management of warehouses, known as apotheke, where collected goods were stored before distribution. These warehouses were strategically located throughout the empire to facilitate the swift movement of resources to areas of greatest need, particularly during times of famine or military conflict. The careful management of these supply chains was essential to maintaining the stability of the Byzantine economy. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping was a critical aspect of Byzantine tax collection, with various methods employed to ensure accuracy and accountability. The use of wax tablets, parchment, and later paper allowed for the detailed documentation of tax assessments and payments. Scribes, often trained in the intricacies of Byzantine legal and administrative language, were responsible for maintaining these records, ensuring that they adhered to the bureaucratic standards established by the imperial government. The practice of double-entry bookkeeping, although not formally recognized during the Byzantine period, was informally adopted by various tax collectors who sought to maintain accurate accounts of their transactions. This method allowed for the reconciliation of incoming tax revenues with expenditures, providing a clearer picture of the financial health of local and provincial administrations. In addition to written records, oral traditions also played a role in tax documentation. Local communities often had their own systems of verification, wherein respected elders or community leaders would attest to the accuracy of tax assessments and payments. This dual system of recording, formal bureaucratic documentation and informal community verification, created a complex web of accountability that both supplemented and challenged the central authority of the Byzantine state. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines were characterized by a rich tapestry of regional variations, evolving through different historical periods, governed by intricate bureaucratic regulations, and reliant on sophisticated supply chains and record-keeping methods. The mundane details of tax administration, while often overlooked, provide invaluable insights into the functioning of one of history's most enduring empires. The Byzantine approach to tax collection, with its emphasis on regulation, logistics, and meticulous record-keeping, reflects the broader complexities of governance in a multifaceted and diverse society. The Byzantine Empire, flourishing from approximately the 4th century to the 15th century, was characterized by a complex and often convoluted system of governance, which included a multifaceted approach to tax collection. While many narratives focus on the grandeur of Byzantine emperors and military exploits, the minutiae of tax collection procedures and the bureaucratic labyrinth that facilitated them often remain underappreciated. This exploration seeks to delve into the often overlooked aspects of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines, illuminating the minor historical figures who played pivotal roles, specific case studies that exemplify these processes, and how these practices compared to other regions at the time. #####minor historical figures and their roles. In the Byzantine administrative hierarchy, numerous minor historical figures exerted considerable influence over tax collection processes, though their names may not appear in grand historical narratives. One such figure was the eparch, an official responsible for overseeing the taxation of a specific geographic area, often a city or district. The eparch was tasked with the collection of taxes, but equally important was the verification of these collections, requiring the eparch to maintain accurate records and ensure compliance with imperial edicts. Another notable yet minor figure was the logothete, a title referring to various bureaucrats within the Byzantine government, some of whom were specifically responsible for financial matters, including tax collection. The logothete's role was pivotal in ensuring that taxes were not only collected but also documented meticulously. The logothete would often engage in lengthy correspondence with local officials, outlining the expected revenues, deadlines for payment, and penalties for non-compliance. The cartophylax, a lesser-known ecclesiastical official, also played a role in tax-related matters, particularly in religious contexts. This individual was responsible for maintaining the church's financial records and ensuring that the church's tax obligations to the imperial treasury were met. The interaction between ecclesiastical tax obligations and imperial expectations provides a fascinating glimpse into the intertwined nature of church and state in Byzantium. ###specific case studies with dates. To better understand the Byzantine tax collection system, one must examine specific case studies that illuminate the intricacies of tax verification and documentation. One such case is the tax collection in Constantinople during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565 AD. In 532 AD, Justinian instituted a comprehensive tax reform aimed at increasing state revenues. This reform mandated that all tax collectors submit detailed reports to the imperial office, outlining not only the amounts collected but also the methods employed in their collection. Sources indicate that in 537 AD, following the Nika riots, the need for a robust verification system became evident. The imperial treasury faced a shortfall due to the unrest, leading to the establishment of a new office specifically dedicated to auditing tax collectors. This office, known as the Commissarian, was charged with conducting surprise audits and ensuring that all collected taxes were duly reported and remitted. Another notable case occurred during the reign of Basil II, 976-1025 AD. In 1000 AD, in an effort to streamline tax collection in the provinces, Basil initiated a program wherein local governors were required to submit monthly documentation of tax receipts directly to the imperial treasury. This program was particularly significant in regions such as Thrace, where local governors often manipulated tax assessments to their advantage. Historical accounts suggest that Basil's reforms led to a marked increase in tax revenues, demonstrating the efficacy of stringent verification procedures. ### Comparative analysis with other regions. When comparing Byzantine tax collection practices with those of contemporaneous regions, several key differences and similarities emerge. For instance, in Western Europe, particularly during the early medieval period, tax collection was often rudimentary and heavily reliant on local lords or noble families. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire maintained a centralized bureaucracy that enabled more uniform tax collection practices across its vast territories. The Sasanian Empire, which coexisted with Byzantium, also had a complex taxation system. However, the Sasanian approach was notably different in that it relied heavily on land taxes, whereas the Byzantine system incorporated a broader range of taxes, including trade tariffs and income taxes. Byzantine tax officials were often trained bureaucrats who adhered to a codified set of laws regarding tax collection, while Sasanian officials relied more on local customs and practices. Additionally, Byzantine tax verification procedures were markedly more detailed than those found in the early Islamic caliphates. Islamic tax collection, particularly the zakat, was often simpler in its requirements, focusing primarily on the wealth of the individual rather than a detailed assessment of income. Byzantine officials, on the other hand, were required to compile comprehensive reports detailing not just the amounts collected but also the demographics of the tax base, thereby creating a more extensive bureaucratic burden. Archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological excavations in Byzantine sites have yielded a wealth of information regarding tax collection practices. In the ruins of Ephesus, for instance, inscriptions have been found that detail tax rates for various commodities, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of market dynamics. These inscriptions indicate that tax rates fluctuated based on the supply and demand of goods, a practice that required vigilant oversight by tax officials. Moreover, the discovery of papyrus documents in the Fayum oasis in Egypt, a province of the Byzantine Empire, has provided insight into the payment receipt documentation timelines. These documents, dating from the 6th century, include meticulous records of tax payments and receipts issued by local officials. Scholars have interpreted these findings as evidence of a standardized system for documenting tax transactions, with specific timelines for payment and verification clearly outlined. In the ruins of Constantinople, researchers discovered an archive containing the records of tax collectors from the 8th century. These records include correspondence between tax officials and the central treasury, revealing a bureaucratic process that necessitated not only the collection of taxes but also the retention of documentation for future audits. This archive serves as a testament to the Byzantine commitment to thorough record-keeping and accountability in tax matters. Primary source quotations, invented but plausible. To further enrich our understanding of Byzantine tax practices and to provide a sense of the administrative mindset of the time, we can consider a selection of invented yet plausible primary source quotations that reflect the bureaucratic language of the era. 1. Let it be known that all eparchs shall submit their tax reports by the first of each month, lest they incur the ire of the logothete, who shall not tolerate negligence in matters of the imperial treasury. From the Edict of Emperor Justinian, 532 A.D. 2. The Commissarian, appointed by the grace of our most just emperor, shall inspect the records of tax collectors without prior notice, to ensure that the revenues of our beloved empire are safeguarded against the avarice of local officials. Memo from the Imperial Treasury, 537 A.D. 3. In the year of our Lord 1000, let all governors know that the timely submission of tax receipts is a sacred duty, for the prosperity of the empire depends upon the diligence of its servants. Proclamation from Emperor Basil II. 4. It is decreed that the receipts for taxes collected must be inscribed in triplicate, with one copy for the collector, one for the eparch, and one to be sent to the logothete in Constantinople, ensuring that no man may escape the watchful eye of the empire. Regulation from the Department of Taxation, 950 AD. Conclusion. In conclusion, the Byzantine Empire's approach to tax collection and verification procedures is a complex tapestry woven from the threads of history, minor yet significant figures, and intricate bureaucratic practices. By examining specific case studies, comparing with other regions, and analyzing archaeological findings, we gain a deeper understanding of a system that, while often overlooked, was crucial to the stability and prosperity of the empire. The diligent work of officials, the establishment of systematic procedures, and the emphasis on documentation reveal a civilization that was as administratively adept as it was culturally rich. The Byzantine tax system, though it may seem dull and tedious, reflects the underlying principles of governance that sustained one of history's most enduring empires. Such an exploration invites further reflection on the unseen forces that underpin the grand narratives of our past. The Byzantine Empire, which persisted from approximately 330 AD until the fall of Constantinople in 1453, was characterized by a complex and often cumbersome system of tax collection. This process was not just about collecting revenue, it involved meticulous verification procedures and extensive documentation timelines. To fully appreciate the depth of Byzantine imperial tax collection, we must delve into the minutiae of the roles played by minor historical figures, specific case studies, and comparative analyses with other regions, all while examining archaeological findings and interpretations. Minor historical figures and their roles. While many historical accounts focus on emperors and military leaders, the Byzantine tax system was heavily influenced by various lesser-known bureaucrats and officials. Among these figures, the logothetes played a crucial role. The logothete was an official responsible for managing the finances of the empire. Their duties included overseeing tax collection, maintaining financial records, and ensuring proper allocation of resources. One notable logothete, Michael of Antioch, served during the reign of Emperor Justinian I. His tenure, which lasted from 527 to 565 AD, was marked by rigorous enforcement of tax laws. Michael was known for his insistence on accuracy in tax records, a necessity considering the size of the empire and the diversity of its provinces. His famous assertion, recorded in an imagined tax ledger, let no coin go unaccounted, for each is a soldier in the army of our state, encapsulates the Byzantine ethos surrounding fiscal responsibility. Another lesser-known figure was Theodora the tax collector, a minor but impactful official in the 10th century. Theodora was responsible for collecting taxes in the provinces of Thrace. Historical records, albeit scarce, indicate that she was particularly adept at navigating local customs and practices, which often varied from one region to another. Her ability to adapt and negotiate with local leaders allowed her to maximize revenue collection without inciting rebellion. A plausible quote attributed to her might be, "To collect taxes is to gather not just coins, but the very will of the people." Specific case studies with dates. To illustrate the Byzantine tax collection process, we can examine specific case studies that highlight the procedures in various regions of the empire. 1. Case study of Asia Minor, circa 600 AD. In the early 7th century, the Byzantine Empire faced significant challenges, including invasions from the Persians. During this tumultuous period, the tax collection process in Asia Minor became increasingly stringent. The local governor, Leo of Ephesus, implemented a verification procedure requiring all tax collectors to provide detailed accounts of their collections. This involved gathering receipts from local merchants and landowners, which were then cross-referenced with imperial records. A plausible excerpt from Leo's correspondence might read, "Let each receipt bear the mark of authenticity, for in such marks lie the strength of our coffers." 2. Case study of the themes, circa 800 AD. As the Byzantine Empire evolved, so too did its tax collection mechanisms. The establishment of the themes, or military districts, in the 7th century resulted in a more localized approach to taxation. In the theme of Thessalonica, for example, tax collectors were required to submit a detailed report every year by the Feast of the Nativity. This report included a summary of taxes collected, along with accompanying documentation verifying the amounts. The local tax collector, Andronikos, is known to have faced significant challenges in verifying the authenticity of receipts from smaller villages, leading to a noted increase in disputes over tax liabilities. A fabricated but plausible quote from Andronikos could state, "In every receipt lies a tale of toil, let us not let falsehoods cloud our treasury." 3. Case study of the Peloponnese, circa 1180 AD. The late 12th century saw a shift in tax collection practices as the Byzantine Empire faced internal strife and economic decline. In the Peloponnese, Count Alexios of Messenia was tasked with overseeing tax collection in a region rife with corruption. In an effort to restore order, Alexios introduced a new verification procedure that required tax collectors to present their receipts to a council of local landowners for validation. This system aimed to deter fraud and ensure that taxes were being collected fairly. The council's resolution, likely drafted by a scribe, might have read, "Let transparency guide our hands, for in unity we find strength against deceit." Comparative analysis with other regions. The Byzantine tax collection system can be effectively compared with systems in contemporary regions, such as the Islamic Caliphate and the Frankish Kingdom. In the Islamic Caliphate, tax collection was often overseen by a diwan, an administrative body responsible for managing state finances. The diwan employed a more decentralized approach whereby local leaders had considerable autonomy in tax collection. This contrasts sharply with the Byzantine model, where centralized authority maintained strict oversight. A plausible document from a caliphate official might assert, in each province, the hand of the local leader shall guide the collection, for the people trust their own more than distant rulers. In the Frankish kingdom, particularly during the reign of Charlemagne, tax collection was equally rigorous, yet it integrated local customs and practices into its framework. Frankish tax collectors, known as missi dominici, worked alongside local nobility to gather taxes, often resulting in a more cooperative relationship than seen in Byzantine provinces. An invented quote from a Frankish missus might state, "In the bond of trust between lord and peasant, we shall find the true measure of our wealth." Archaeological findings and interpretations. Recent archaeological excavations have shed light on Byzantine tax collection practices, particularly through the discovery of tax registers and receipt fragments in sites such as Ephesus and Constantinople. These documents, often inscribed on papyrus or parchment, provide invaluable insights into the verification procedures and payment receipt timelines. 1. Tax registers. Excavations in Ephesus unearthed a number of tax registers dating back to the 9th century. These registers included detailed accounts of taxes owed by various social classes, including landowners, merchants, and artisans. The meticulous nature of these documents indicates a well-established bureaucratic system that necessitated accuracy and transparency. Historians speculate that these registers were essential for cross-referencing payments, as they often included annotations concerning disputes and resolutions. 2. Receipt fragments. Fragments of receipts found in Constantinople have revealed the typical structure of tax documentation. These receipts typically included the date of payment, the amount paid, and the name of the tax collector who issued the receipt. The presence of multiple layers of authentication, such as seals and signatures, points to a sophisticated verification process designed to prevent fraud. An imagined archaeologist's note might read, "These fragments tell a tale of diligence, each seal a promise, each signature a bond." Primary source quotations, invented but plausible. To further illustrate the Byzantine approach to tax collection, we can draw upon plausible invented quotations that encapsulate the mindset and procedures of the era. 1. From a tax collector's manual, "In the act of collecting, let not haste be our companion, for it is through patience and diligence that we secure the empire's future." 2. From an imperial edict, "Let it be known, all tax collectors shall render their accounts true and just, for the wrath of the emperor shall fall heavily upon those who would deceive." 3. From a local assembly meeting, "As we gather to discuss the burdens of taxation, let us remember that our strength lies in unity, for a divided populace is easily plundered." Conclusion. The Byzantine imperial tax collection system was a labyrinthine process fraught with challenges and intricacies. Understanding its history requires an exploration of the roles played by minor historical figures, detailed case studies, and comparative analyses with other regions, along with insights gleaned from archaeological findings and plausible primary source quotations. As we conclude this exhaustive examination, it becomes evident that the Byzantine approach to tax collection was not merely a means of generating revenue, but a reflection of the empire's broader social and political structures. The verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines were emblematic of an empire that valued order, accountability, and the intricate web of relationships that bound its diverse populace together. By delving into these layers of complexity, we not only gain insight into the Byzantine Empire's fiscal policies but also appreciate the underlying human aspects of governance, responsibility, and trust that permeated this fascinating historical period. The Byzantine tax system, while mundane in nature, reveals much about the empire's priorities, challenges, and the meticulous efforts to maintain its vast and diverse territories. Thus, the history of Byzantine imperial tax collection, with its detailed procedures and documentation, serves as a reminder of the often overlooked intricacies of governance that shaped one of history's most enduring empires. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our calming journey through the often overlooked, yet intriguingly dull history of Byzantine imperial tax collection verification procedures and payment receipt documentation timelines. It may seem a far cry from the grand tales of emperors and conquests, yet within the intricate web of bureaucracy, we have uncovered a world of meticulous detail and a steadfast commitment to order that defined an empire. As we wandered through the annals of history, we explored the rigorous processes that were put in place to ensure fairness and accuracy in taxation, a testament to the Byzantine Empire's incredible attention to administrative detail. We examined the methods of verification, the roles of various officials, and the documentation that served as the backbone of fiscal responsibility. Who knew that such a foundational aspect of governance could be so rich with nuance, albeit in a rather tranquil and uneventful way? Throughout our exploration, we have been mindful of the patterns of life in the Byzantine era, the echoes of voices long silenced, and the rhythms of daily existence that unfolded under the watchful eyes of tax collectors. The pages may have been filled with numbers and regulations, but they also contain the stories of individuals, families, and communities striving to thrive amidst the complexities of their time. In the end, we have learned that every detail, no matter how mundane, contributes to the larger tapestry of history. As you drift off into a peaceful slumber, I encourage you to carry with you the calmness of this journey. Allow the gentle hum of Byzantine bureaucracy to soften the edges of your day, wrapping you in a cocoon of tranquility. Remember, if you find yourself craving a return to our soothing exploration, feel free to replay this episode at any time. It is merely a touch of a button away, waiting to guide you back into the serene world of history. Thank you, dear listener, for accompanying me on this gentle voyage through a subject that may have seemed unassuming, yet carried with it the weight of a civilization's legacy. As you nestle into your cozy embrace of blankets and pillows, may your mind be free of worries and your heart be light. May your dreams be filled with soft whispers of ancient times, reminding you of the quiet strength found in diligence and order. Sleep well, dear friend, and allow the night to carry you to peaceful realms where history dances softly in the moonlight. Good night, and sweet dreams.